Hello everyone, it's Reese here, and I'm back with another reaction video. So I was asked to do something on the Oscars, but I had a look. So sort of the Oscars happened the weekend, as I'm recording this, and big wins for Michael B. Jordan, wins for One Battle After Another, ties in a short film category that's very exciting apparently. K-pop Demon Hunters storming. So let's do some sort of reaction. But the problem is I can't really talk about this year's Oscars really because I've only seen two of any of the films. I've only seen Weapons and Sinners. I believe there were very, very few of the films that were nominated this year that I had the opportunity to see, or B, that really caught my eye at all. Um, but there was something that really leapt out, which was the sort of the discourse around it, and that this was an excellent year for horror at the Oscars. So horror is a genre, like many of the more popular genres, shall we say, it's typically really overlooked. Um, I think there's been the case of perhaps there have been, is it 8 or 9 sort of horror acting performances ever recognised with Academy Awards, and the list of horror Oscars is really quite short. But this is despite the fact that sort of famously there's sort of there are famously a lot of rubbish performances in the genre as is the case of any genre, but there are many that have been sort of it's felt are considerably overlooked. So I thought I would react to this piece that I found on Collider. It doesn't capture this year's ones, but the most outrageous Oscars horror snub, sorry, in Oscars history. Now there are some here that I suspect we know are coming, right? If Tony Collette in Hereditary doesn't appear on this list, I will eat my hat. We're seeing Lupita Nyong'o in Us in the picture. We're seeing Anthony Perkins. We're seeing Sigourney Weaver. I'm intrigued to see what else is on this list and see sort of I offer some shouts for people we'll see who appears here, and then shouts for people who sort of may perhaps have been worthy of awards attention, certainly more awards attention than they may have received. So this is a piece by Lloyd Farley. So there you are, you see sort of in the introduction. It took 45 years for a horror film to even be nominated for Best Picture. Only Silence of the Lambs has won Best Picture. There have only been 6 horror films to be nominated for Best Picture. That now bumps up to 7 with Sinners. But yes, it's a genre that's criminally under-recognised. So we're going to have a look through. I'll sort of react to each of these points, and we will see sort of what I think. Do I agree? So number 1, Evil Dead Rise, Best Makeup and Hairstyling. Yeah. So it says here sort of that if horror is going to be recognised, it tends to be in a kind of below the line category, right? So sort of makeup and hairstyling. I think this category was invented for The Fly, not officially, but essentially. And often bear in mind that kind of the genre is perhaps more experimental with makeup and hairstyling techniques than anything perhaps other than sci-fi. It seems unlikely. It seems unusual that the category it wouldn't always be a slam dunk for the genre. And I would say that you could list many, many films that would sort of make it would be deserving winners of this category. I said The Fly, American Werewolf in London is what I mean. The Fly came slightly later. Now, for its credit, it has been the case that horror has been recognised here a few times. So I mentioned The Fly. I mentioned American Werewolf in London. Pan's Labyrinth is one. The Wolfman, famously. But it tends to be a case where sort of the genre in recent years has tended, and then The Substance one in 2024, Frankenstein this year. But the nominees tend to be essentially sort of conventional dramas in a sense. Where sort of, I'm not saying these things aren't impressive, but they're less sort of obvious. Whereas in the horror, sort of this is more perhaps more overt in terms of the value and the sort of the specifics that makeup and hairstyling is bringing, and probably here with special effects as well and with practical effects. These are things that are done so well in horror, and yet can be really, really under recognised. Let's leap ahead. The Babadook, Essie Davis for Best Actress. So again, The Babadook was a controversial film, and it's the kid was not being nominated for a Best Supporting Actor, shall we say. Again, sort of it's one performance that I'm sure it's going to be matched a bit later on of mothers sort of grappling with grief and grappling with sort of the difficulties of being sort of parent in sort of impossible situations. Um, and yeah, 2014. I think there's a fair case to make. Is there a fair case to make? Who was she up against? Let me have a look. So I have this sort of thing in my thing next to me. And so this was the year that Julianne Moore won for Still Alice. To my mind, should have been Rosamund Pike for Gone Girl, but there we go. Looking at the list, so Marion Cotillard, 2 Days, One Night, Felicity Jones, The Theory of Everything, and Reese Witherspoon in Wild, it's hard to see who you would lose. It may be the case that if it was sort of where I don't know exactly when it was released, it may be the case if it fell into the 2015 Oscars, and the year Brie Larson won for Room. There is a nomination there for Jennifer Lawrence that feels a little, perhaps that one could have been tentative. I don't know, I'm fully on board with this one, but it's incredible forms, very much so. There it is. I told you it was coming. So the Hereditary nomination, the lack of nomination, this has been so. This is held up as the example of the Academy refusing to recognise horror. This is a heart-wrenching and terrifying and performance that's doing everything. It really is. It lands so well. Sort of, this is perhaps Kurt's best ever performance on film, and it wasn't even nominated. Now, and this is often held up as the fact that if this performance were in a film of, say, sort of more conventional genre, it almost certainly would have been on the list. And now you look at the list for that year. So this is really Olivia Colman one. We also had Yalitza Aparicio from Roma, Glenn Close for The Wife, Lady Gaga, A Star Is Born, Melissa McCarthy, Can You Ever Forgive Me? It's quite a stacked category. I don't know who you would lose from that. Is it sort of bad to say maybe Glenn Close? I know it sort of was meant to be her year, as it were, until it wasn't. And sort of Close or Melissa McCarthy probably would be who I would lose. Sort of Colette is one of the oversights, not just in horror, but sort of generally. It, Best Adapted Screenplay. Yeah, this I don't know where I land on this. So yeah, Stephen King. King's works about King have not overly been recognised at the Oscars. Obviously, there was Misery and Kathy Bates winning there. The Shawshank Redemption famously was nominated and sort of was quite overlooked in a year that was an incredibly strong year for films. Forrest Gump, The Lion King, Pulp Fiction, all of those together. My issue here is, I suppose, sort of adapted screenplay when it's kind of half a story, and the It story fundamentally is a story of two halves: the gang, the Losers Club as kids, and the club as adults. And although, I would not disagree with the idea that, as the piece says here, it's a faithful, smart adaptation of King's novel. And I don't know it would fully be my choice. I don't know sort of I say sort of it's Oscar worthy. There we go. A Shaun of the Dead Best Original Screenplay. Now that's something that feels so. This is sort of a highly inventive. This is Edgar Wright and Simon Pegg doing something incredibly novel, incredibly different, sort of reinventing a genre, really, and doing it in two genres incredibly, doing a zombie film, a horror film, and a comedy film, and sort of landing both really, really well. It is a really, really good film and really rich as well. And it's one of those films like The World's End After It that is so rich with details and sort of composition techniques, and a lot of that is in the screenwriting. There is there space. So sort of that year, the award was won by Charlie Kaufman for Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. And the other nominees were The Aviator, Hotel Rwanda, Vera Drake, and The Incredibles, which is fantastic. I haven't seen half of those films, so I'm not sort of best placed to comment. Again, it's the kind of script that's doing sort of incredibly rich, interesting things. I don't know if it's a little too on the nose. It's a little too difficult for sort of the Academy to recognise, would be my suspicion there. Us. they were saying both Best Picture and Lupita Nyong'o for Best Actress. So again, if you're saying when I'm talking about sort of widely recognised snubs, I would say this is also one of the high ones, especially in the sort of the horror world. So this is a film in which characters play doubles. So Nyong'o is actually playing two characters: Adelaide, the central character, and a supposedly evil doppelganger called Red. And you see these characters as two halves of the same person, but also as sort of so radically different personalities. It's a double role, which is tough. I mean, I'm saying this. What's his name? Michael B. Jordan won this year for a double role that was arguably less challenging. Not arguably less challenging, but sort of arguably less. There's more overlap between his characters. This year, the nominees were so Renée Zellweger won as Judy Garland in Judy, and the other nominees were Cynthia Erivo for Harriet, Scarlett Johansson for Marriage Story, Saoirse Ronan for Little Women, and Charlize Theron for Bombshell. And if I'm being honest with you, that last category, that last nomination is the one I would lose. And Bombshell is sort of a bit of a, I don't want to say a nothing film, but it's a sort of, there's not too much to do. It's sort of the straight genre that sort of the Academy tend to sort of recognise, sort of inoffensively, whereas this would have been quite an interesting, unique, and sort of very worthwhile nomination. In terms of Best Picture, the nominees, so Parasite won that year, and then Ford versus Ferrari, The Irishman, Jojo Rabbit, Joker, Little Women, Marriage Story, 1917, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And now it's no secret, I think, to people who know me, that I'm not the biggest fan of Jordan Peele's work. I find him to be sort of really quite overrated. And I'm looking at this list, and I don't know exactly what you would lose there. In truth, it's widely recognised that the film is less good, less popular, less critically well received than help me out, brain, than his Get Out was. I'm not entirely sure I would make the case for it being in that list. There are some sort of very interesting swings like this, and of course, the first ever foreign language winner. I think Best Actress is definitely something that you make the case for, but I'm not on board for Best Picture. American Psycho, Christian Bale for Best Actor. Yeah. So Patrick Bateman is is a phenomenon, is a cultural reference point, really. This is a man who's meant to be sort of ostensibly charming, well put together, well composed, but is sort of essentially breaking down at the edges. It is a really interesting performance, and it's one that I would I can sort of see the virtue of this one very much so. Looking at the list as well, there is definite space. So that year, Denzel Washington won for Training Day. The other nominees: Russell Crowe in A Beautiful Mind, Will Smith in Ali, Tom Wilkinson in The Bedroom, and the film I would take out, sort of an Oscar nomination that I've always been a little iffy about, is Sean Penn in I Am Sam. With a performance so interesting, he was famously sort of parodied in a Tropic Thunder, and there was space for this one, and that was where the space was, without a shadow of a doubt. The others, Best Picture. This is interesting. This is not one that I've really ever heard talked about too much in terms of sort of Oscar snubs. In all honesty, so this is the same year again, and this year the winner of the award was Chicago. Let me get this up in front of me. Yeah, so this is sort of a ghost story, right? And the ghost story may have been a bit safer, perhaps, with the fact that sort of it's a sort of calmer, more conventional style of, I almost want to say safer style of horror. Something that's sort of an arguably more conservative, a more conservative Academy Award base might have might have been able to back. But I'm looking at the list and I'm not really seeing where the space is here. I wouldn't really call this a snub. And so as it says there, Chicago won, and the other nominees: Gangs of New York, The Hours, Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, and The Pianist. And I'm not really, if I'm honest, seeing the room for the others in there. This was at a point where the awards were not yet 10. There were not yet 10 nominees. So maybe if it was an expanded pool, maybe, but I'm not really seeing that one. I've got to be honest. Let the Right One In for Best Picture. So this is, and it's the Swedish one as well, which is quite the interesting pick. So Swedish vampire story. But I say a vampire story, but really sort of a story of essentially two children getting to know each other and sort of develop a friendship in a place where, one of them is sort of mild-mannered and bullied, and one of them is a vampire. This was the last year before the Best Picture pool was expanded, and so Slumdog Millionaire won. And the other nominees there: The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, Frost Nixon, Milk, and The Reader. And I don't want to say foreign language films were never really nominated, but I'm not entirely sure that this would have been the kind of film that would really be sort of capturing the Academy again. It's worth stating that it didn't make it into the Best Foreign Language Film either, which feels to me sort of there's definitely space there. But yeah, no, I'm not entirely sure that I would sort of agree with this being a Best Picture either. There's a slight hint of this being the guy's sort of uplifting films he likes, I would say. It's Psycho, Anthony Perkins Best Actor. So Psycho performed, so it picked up several Oscar. I think it picked up 4 Oscar nominations. So there was a Best Actress for Janet Leigh. I believe there are a few more. Give me a second. But famously, I think was Hitchcock there as well. But yeah, no, Perkins, who sort of really is the heart of the film, was really criminally overlooked. It must be said. So yes, nominated for 4 Oscars. So Best Director, Best Supporting Actress, Best Art Direction in the Black and White category, and Best Cinematography, Black and White as well. So there are things that are missing there. I mean, sort of definitely Best Actor, Best Score as well, I would say, is a way, Bernard Herrmann. Perkins is the heart of Psycho, and as it may be the case, that's what I've written on Psycho, and this is a film I very, very much enjoy. Yes, I mean, he is amazing in the film, but it's the kind of performance, I would say, and sort of, bear in mind sort of the film's reputation, shall we say. How shocking it was on its release, even though it was a box office smash hit. It would have been a hard sell. It would very, very much have been a hard sell. And if you look at the pool of who he would have been up against, so 2 nominees for Judgment at Nuremberg. So Maximilian Schnell, who won, and then Spencer Tracy. Charles Boyer for Fanny, Boyer, I should say, Paul Newman for The Hustler, and Stuart Whitman for The Mark. And I would say there was definitely space there. I think how cool a nomination that would have been, but that feels to me there's definitely space there. The Shining, Stanley Kubrick for Best Director. So famously, the film picked up Razzie nominations, and people were not in on The Shining. I believe it was a bit of a sort of a box office flop when it was released. Wendy Duvall, I think, was nominated for Worst Actress at the Razzies, and Kubrick for Worst Director. And we look back on this now and think, what on earth were people thinking? What on earth was the logic of that one? Yes, sort of, as it says here, Kubrick was doing things. The Steadicam direction, the sort of the way he sort of defines and scopes this world, was doing things here that really, make this film. The film still works now. It works incredibly well, nearly 50 years later, and you look at the list of people that he's up against. So the winner that year was Warren Beatty for Reds. The other nominees: Hugh Hudson, Chariots of Fire; Louis Malle, Atlantic City; Mark Riddell on Golden Pond, and Steven Spielberg, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Um, Now, it's, I want to say there is definitely space there. Um, so there are films here. I've seen On Golden Pond. I've seen Raiders of the Lost Ark. Chariots of Fire is still on my list, the famous 1,000 film list. Um, it would have taken, I think, much more love for The Shining than existed, and sort of at the time, it was sort of derided and nominated for sort of worst awards. And so this was an award that was never going to happen, right? This was one that was never on the cards. But it would have been an incredibly cool one, and to recognise a film as well that really was has grown to be critically loved. As we stated, of course, Kubrick would never win a competitive Academy Award. Alien, Sigourney Weaver for Best Actress. And so, as it says there, Weaver was nominated for the second film, Aliens. I would say that this is kind of a case of where she's positioned in this first film. So she's very good in it. But the first film is sort of almost kind of an ensemble piece until sort of she's essentially the only one left. So I don't know I'd fully be on board with that. And the fact that she was recognised for the second film, in which she kind of gets more to do. Is that fair to say? Perhaps makes this case less strong than it could be. Let's have a look at who she was up against that year, assuming she would have assuming she'd have been nominated. So what year is this? So this year, the winner was Sissy Spacek, Coal Miner's Daughter. Other nominees: Ellen Burstyn, Resurrection; Goldie Hawn, Private Benjamin; Mary Tyler Moore, Ordinary People; and Gina Rowlands in Gloria. I'm going to be honest, don't know those films well enough to know if any of them would be sort of appropriate to remove. But I would say that the fact that it was recognised with a nomination, was recognised where are we looking? It was recognised sort of a few years later. Feels to me sufficient. I don't think sort of she's missed out because that nomination is there. Frankenstein, Best Picture. So we're going right back to the start here. We're going back to one of the first ever Academy Awards ceremonies. And I say this charitably, but some of the earlier nominees in this category have not aged well at all. So this would have been either released the year that Cimarron won, and Cimarron famously is sort of one of the film that sort of doesn't work at all, or A Grand Hotel. Now the categories that year were quite sort of how can I say, they were quite flexible in how many nominees they had, and this was a film that kind of invented a genre, right? This, along with the Universal's Dracula as well, sort of really invented horror media. And it would have been a really fantastic nomination. It would have been a really compelling, interesting one. And I would say this is someone that's missed out, especially because in those days there weren't really the rules about what could be nominated or how many things should be nominated. So the 30-31 season had 5 nominees, and the following year there were 8. So there's definitely sort of flexibility and scope there. And then the year after that has 10. So definitely space. Jaws, Steven Spielberg for Best Director. So Spielberg is not sort of as I think we can say someone who's not he's not missed out on Academy Awards. He has many nominations, and has won twice. So he has 9 nominations. Has won 2, Schindler's List and Saving Private Ryan. But yeah, his original film, his sort of the original big hit, Jaws. Again, Jaws was a box office smash hit, and what it received attention at the Oscars again. So John Williams won, I believe, Best Score for Jaws. So this is, the Academy was certainly in on it to an extent. They certainly saw it and recognised it. And a lot of it is down to the direction. It's quite interesting that would not be recognised. When a lot of this put together, so it was up for 4 awards: Best Picture, which it didn't win, but then it won Best Original Score, Best Film Editing, and Best Sound. And yeah, I mean, direction feels like quite an oversight, really, based on the popularity of the film. Who was Spielberg up against is very much the question here. And it might be the case that because he was sort of this young wonder kid, and maybe they didn't want to recognise him just yet. I mean, it was quite a stacked lineup. So that year, Milos Forman won for One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, famously taking the big 5 awards. It was up against Federico Fellini, Amarcord, Stanley Kubrick, Barry Lyndon, Sidney Lumet for A Dog Day Afternoon, and Robert Altman for Nashville. So a stacked lineup. It's not immediately apparent who would leave there, who you'd miss out. But this is one that I can think does feel like a miss. Midsummer Best Cinematography, and the last film on the list. It's striking to me that they would pick cinematography when, as they say in the piece, that Florence Pugh is Best Actress feels quite an oversight as well. The film, I must admit, looks gorgeous. It really, really does. And I would not begrudge. Yeah, I think of all the nominations that one could have picked up, I would have gone for a. I'd have gone for actress. Certainly, Florence Pugh is incredible, and her award will come. I am sure. There's no doubt about that in my mind. And the cinematography and sort of again is something that I would very much be on board. With because that makes sense to me. That one very much makes sense. So it was up against Mank, which won, Judas and the Black Messiah, News of the World, Nomadland, and The Trial of the Chicago 7. And I think there is half that list you could lose really easily. Again, a film that looks. I mean, I was not in on Midsummer. I didn't particularly like it. Florence Pugh is amazing, but otherwise, I sort of hated this film. In truth, I was incredibly bored throughout. But it looks gorgeous. It really, really does. And so, I would call this a miss. I would call this a snub, definitely. And this is the bottom of the list. I'm thinking, I don't really know. So I think my own sort of commentary is that there were sort of laws of music. So horror music is really incredibly inventive. Christopher Young not having an Oscar nom despite making some sort of gorgeous, gorgeous, rich scores is a major miss. And off the top of my head, I can't really think of things that I would consider major misses. Maybe let me have a think. And if you think that would be a video that would be of interesting, me sort of breaking down some categories and films and people that I would give nods to, please do comment below. Let me know. And please do, if there's any sort of big Oscar misses that you are thinking is there in terms of wins or nominations, comment below. Let me know those too. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you've enjoyed this. I hope you found this fun in letting me react. Make sure to like, make sure to subscribe, and make sure to ring the bell so you know when there's a new video. Thank you very, very much. And I look forward to seeing you all in the next one.